Welcome to the Orca. Believe it or not, there are 13 municipal governments within the Capital Regional District in and around Victoria. Some very tiny, like Highlands, for example, home to about 2,200 people, with the largest municipality being Saanich, home to about 115,000 people. And City Hall has an address that says Victoria. Well, for years, there's been talk about amalgamating several of these districts. Local politicians have generally opposed the idea, while the public has been more receptive, at least to the idea of studying amalgamation. Restaurant owner and former Victoria City Councillor Shellie Gudgeon has her own views on all this, and she joins us now from Victoria on Skype. Hello there.
Hello, good afternoon.
So it's understandable why the politicians don't want to amalgamate. We'll talk about that in a moment. But first of all, what are the benefits you see of amalgamation if all these came together as Victoria?
Oh, well, it's elemental in the sense that we're stronger together, for one thing. And what a lot of the municipal politicians, the 94 municipal politicians in the Capital Regional District say is we work together. We can work together well. But sadly, as we know, a mandated council would be far more effective and efficient. And that's what I think that's what the public's looking for, is efficiency, accountability, and with larger numbers, we could access the provincial government and the federal government for more money for infrastructure. Right now, we've heard from multiple of political people at the provincial level from both parties who I think, quietly like the fact that we are fragmented on the island, and the fragmentation leaves them to just let it be. They don't feel pressure from the Capital Regional District to essentially contribute to our infrastructure deficit.
But would there be a greater saving for ratepayers if all 13 municipalities became one?
You know, there's some pretty strong arguments against that. They say that it will bloat, it'll create a bloated government. The people who are anti-amalgamation also say that the closer government is to the people, the more efficient it is. Some people argue that it'll just, the unions will benefit from if there was only one. A lot of business people are concerned. They believe that capitalism and competition is good. So hence, that's why we as a group, Amalgamation Yes, have over the years, from my time being on council and since for the last 4 years, have really come to see that we like the 3+ model. If you're familiar with the Capital Region, you can, even geographically, we define ourselves as the peninsula, the West Shore, and the core. And so we see that would create competition. We would still need the CRD. It would still be the umbrella of the 3 municipalities. But we see some real benefits in reducing the amount of municipalities from 13 to potentially 3+. Maybe one of the outlying communities would remain independent.
But each municipality comes with its own level of bureaucracy. And one would think if you amalgamated, even if you formed 3 in the regional district, that would decrease the bureaucracy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so that's what we're trying to do. I mean, they're like children. If you've seen any of the headlines in the last, the coconuts keep falling from the trees. There's always issues with the 13 squabbling, either city managers or fire chiefs or police chiefs. I mean, it goes on. So we really confidently feel that it will definitely increase efficiency and accountability, and it'll create a more livable region to have 3 rather than 13.
Apart from the politics of it, what would the general benefit be to one amalgamated region?
1 or 3, because we're looking at 1.
Okay, say 3.
Well, I mean, a very simple thing that's often talked about is that we would now have a seat at the big city mayors conference. We would show the fact that we can unite, and then we can advocate to senior levels of government for infrastructure that we desperately need on the island, transportation being one, because we're creating gridlock, and it's one of the things we hear from the public regularly. I think a lot of the anti-folks think it'll erode neighborhoods. I think it's quite the opposite. I'd love to go back to just worrying about the park being tended to and not have to think of the major issues that we face in the Capital Region that aren't being dealt with. Look at how long it took us to deal with sewage. And any number of issues on a daily basis, transit. we're not moving forward, I don't think, as the capital city of British Columbia, the way we could be moving forward if we had more cohesive government, municipal government.
I mentioned in the introduction Highlands, perhaps. Let's use that as the example, because that's one of the smallest, home to about 2,200 people. What would they lose in Highlands if they became part of this larger area with three larger municipalities?
Well, I think they fear, most neighbors, and I've talked to a lot in many different municipalities in the capital region, most people fear the connection to government. They like being able to pick up the phone and contact their local elected official. They like View Royal, people who live in View Royal, they like to be able to know the name of the director of planning, perhaps. And they worry that if we amalgamate, they're going to lose that sense of community. And that's where I have advocated and will discuss with them that I think it'll grow it. And we can focus on how do we keep those community, because that's not going to change. Whether there's one, I was just returned from Oahu, Honolulu. They are one municipal government, quote unquote. They are very distinct neighborhoods in Oahu, on the island of Oahu, from the North Shore to Haleiwa in the North Shore down to Kailua, Waikiki. They're very distinct, and yet they have one civic government that runs it all. And I see that's where we need to go, one or three. As I said, in our distinct geographical areas, the core of the peninsula, the West Shore, that's what's needed now, not this fragmentation.
So let me expand on that. So on one side of the coin, Highlands, people in Highlands might lose their familiarity with some of their politicians, but yes, what's the big gain for them to become part of a larger community?
Well, I think one of the things that keeps coming up over the years since I've been involved with this issue is the free rider issue. And I don't want to pick on the Highlands, but Victoria historically bears the brunt of all our social ills. Saanich, the largest municipality in the capital region, is also suffering that in the last, we've seen with the headlines with their tent city. It's not right for Saanich and Victoria to bear the brunt of the other 11 municipalities and pay all the costs of social housing, safe consumption sites. I mean, the list goes on, and they're happy. Highlands, View Royal, smaller municipalities are very happy to let Victoria and Saanich deal with it all while they merrily have their little, but it is a free rider issue. It's an unfair issue, which I believe the residents of Victoria and Saanich recognized in the last election, and that's why they voted yes to the Citizens Assembly that's going to be upcoming and taking place, so that we can see if indeed we are stronger together. If it could work, if the benefits outweigh the negatives.
And that was my next question. How do the people who live in Victoria and Saanich feel about, as you say, the free riders?
Well, it's become, I think there's a level of frustration. There's a level that's starting to percolate. Well, I'm sorry?
Is there animosity building now as well?
I think that, well, I know from when I was on council, I definitely heard it. Of course, I'm in a different group of folks, but I think the average person that reads the daily newspaper in the region is starting to, as somebody so concisely put it, it's the WTF moment every morning when you open the headlines. You know, where's the fun, right?
So what do you think is going to happen? You're no longer on council, but what do you think is going to happen as a concerned citizen? What would you like to see happen?
Well, what is happening, I don't know if you're familiar, but there was the question put on the last ballot in 2018 yes. That said, will you fund the study? So Victoria and Saanich are now beginning the process of, there's two standing committees, and they're identifying terms of reference. Then it'll go out to an RFP to hire a facilitator who will convene a citizens assembly, who will look at the pros and cons of amalgamating, and hopefully whatever the decision they come to will be brought back to the councils, and it'll be done hopefully before the next election, and then we can look at how we move forward from that point, whether we look at amalgamation, maybe that's what we do next, or whether we look at some mandated integration between the two municipalities. And the interesting thing, a lot of people will say, wow, Shellie, then even if Victoria and Saanich were to amalgamate, you've still got 11 or 12 municipalities. What we see with Victoria and Saanich being the two largest in the core area, it would only be a matter of time before Oak Bay and Esquimalt, the other two core municipalities, would have to sit up and pay attention and start saying, okay, maybe we need to be a part of this larger strategy. And if Victoria and Saanich were to amalgamate, that also is a game changer for the CRD, because they would be 9 votes at the table at the CRD, and they would dominate the table. So I think then we would have to look at how we govern ourselves more effectively in the core region. So it's a very incremental, slow step, but it's a start.
Do you think you'll see in the near future then sort of a metropolitan Victoria?
I hope so. A core is what I'm to refer to it as a core Victoria, a capital core, which would be, I think the population of the 4 municipalities would be, 240,000, 230,000 people, which would effectively give us some clout as the capital city.
Shellie Gudgeon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to seeing you in Victoria.